Okay, Rabotai. Erev Shabbat Shalom. It's a big night. It's Chanukah. So Chanukah Sameach. Being that it is the holiday, I shall direct my comments towards the Chag. You know, I think almost every single year, Chanukah, it always falls out on Parashat Miketz. So with the Rabbanim, what they try to do is they always try to make connections between Parashat HaShavua and the holiday of Chanukah itself. So, Mishpachim, I wanted to go through some of these ideas and just give different tidbits of information exactly how does Chanukah connect with Parashat Miketz. All this is on a simple interpretation. I saw from Rabbi Kanievsky, Allah Shalom, he comes along and he says that the connection between Miketz and Chanukah is that Parashat Miketz, it shows us, or it teaches us, that no matter how low a person is in status, no matter how a person feels lowly in his life, Parashat Miketz tells us that that lowliness in a person's life, it can be turned around in a moment, and he could reach even the greatest heights. We find that out from Yosef. Yosef HaTzadik, at this point in the parasha, he's been sitting in prison for 12 years. 12 years in prison, doesn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. He's known as a convict Jew slave boy. That's what he's known as. And again, in prison for a very long time, doesn't see the end of it, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Paro snaps his fingers, and the next thing you know, Yosef turns from convict to king of Egypt overnight. And that's incredible. And that's exactly what Chanukah represents, because Chanukah is the same thing. We have to know that the Jews, in the times of the story of Chanukah, we were in a very low place. In fact, most of the Jews in the story of Chanukah, they became what's called Hellenists. Hellenist is a person who already adopted the Greek mythology, who already adopted Greek philosophy. And they came along and they were completely off the path. Most Jews in the times of the Chanukah story were not keeping Shabbat, they were not keeping kosher, they were not marrying proper Jews. And all of a sudden, there was a small group of Jews, Hashmonaim. They said that we have to turn things around. And at a small group of Hashmonaim, I think the Chida even says that there were 500,000 Greek soldiers, and Hashmonaim started off with only 17 soldiers. 17 soldiers, and eventually people gathered more, and it ended up being 5,000. So 5,000 versus 500,000, that's a true number. Those odds don't exist. And if you're in Vegas and you get those numbers, 5,000 versus 500,000, don't take that bet ever. They're going to lose. At the same time, the Hashmonaim, they said that as long as we make the initial first step, Hashem will save us. And that's exactly what happened. The Jews, they went from the lowliest place in history to the highest place. And for the next 100 plus years, the Hashmonaim were ruling the country, and everybody was religious, and it was a perfect world. It was a utopian society. So therefore, that's what Chanukah represents. Chanukah represents Yosef being in the lowliest place to all of a sudden becoming the king of Egypt. Hashmonaim, Jewish people, being in the lowliest place, all of a sudden governing themselves and making a holiday out of its own. And that's something a person should always remember. Yes, life is very difficult, and yes, a person has ups and downs. That's the whole point of Shavi Potzadik V'Kam. That a person does have very difficult times in his life, but if he keeps in mind that Hashem can turn this around in a moment, Yeshua Hashem Keheref Ayin, that the salvation of Hashem comes in a blink of an eye. That's what happened to Yosef. That's what happened to the Hashmonaim in the times of the Chanukah story. Just thinking off the top of my head, what possible story can I connect with this? If I had to go, the derech of the Talmud and the Gemara, I usually tell the story around the holiday times, but there was a famous story with a man by the name of Elazar ben Durdaya. The Gemara tells a story with him that there was not one, and you forgive me, there's not one prostitute, there's not one zonah that this man did not sleep with. And that was his weakness. His weakness was prostitutes. And all of a sudden he hears about a certain prostitute in a far off country. And what happened is that he had to pay an exorbitant amount of money. We're talking 400 zuz. That money was unheard of back in the day. And he had to travel across 7 seas, and he did it. He went and he traveled. It took him months to get there. Paid this woman his bank account. And when he gets there, the Gemara says that he saw 7 beds, like bunk beds, that was set up for him. Each bed was made out of silver. I'm gonna go explain that. I don't know how comfortable it is to sleep in silver, but that's what the Gemara says was made out of silver. And the very top bed was made out of gold. They said that he climbed all the way while she was waiting for him. And then when he was about to commit the sin, the Gemara says that she blew out with her mouth. She went like this. She made like a blowing sound. And she says that just like that wind will never get back into my mouth, so too Elazar ben Durdaya will never come back in tshuva. I have no idea why this prostitute all of a sudden became the mashgiach of the yeshiva. I don't know why she decided to give this man musar, but that's what the Gemara says. She gave him musar, and she said, just like, that wind won't come back, so too you're not going to come back in tshuva. And apparently that hit Elazar ben Durdaya so hard, like a train. It hit him so difficult that he said, she's right at the end of the day. So he went along and he started asking people to help him do forgiveness. He went to the mountain, says, mountain, please help me do tshuva. The mountain says, until we ask for ourselves, we're going to ask for you. Then he went to the stars and the moon and the constellation. They all said the same thing. Until we have to ask for us, we're going to ask for you. Also, the Gemara says that Elazar ben Durdai, he put his feet in between his legs, in between his knees, and he just cried. He cried and cried and cried until he died, in fact. And he died, and all of a sudden a bat kol came out, and the bat kol said, Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya. The bat kol actually called him Rabbi, like rabbi. So we're talking about a guy that went from the lowliest point in history, he became a rabbi. And again, the rabbi that you had back in the time of the Talmud wasn't like the rabbi that you had today. You don't need too much to become a rabbi today. But back in the day, you needed smicha, it was legitimate. So all of a sudden, this bat kol comes out and calls him Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya, mizuman l'chayolam haba. That all of a sudden, at a moment's time, he became invited into heaven. On this, the Gemara says, Rabbi called down and said, a person could be koneh, a person could acquire olam haba just in one moment, one sha'ahat. Therefore, for Elazar ben Durdai, that's in fact, I think the Hidaw, the Ben Ish Chai says that it's incumbent in his name. His name is Elazar or Eliezer ben Durdaya. Or El-Azar, correct? It's El-Azar ben Durdaya. So it says that the Ben Ish Chai, if you take his name and split it up, it's El, which is Hashem's name. Azar means he helped. So El-Azar, Hashem helped me, Ben Durdaya. Ben can mean the son of, or Ben could also mean between. Durdaya is like the bottom of a barrel, the sediments, the old wine that's on the bottom of the barrel, that's known as the Durdaya. And Durdaya is known to be in the lowliest place. So therefore, El-Azar, Hashem helped this man, Ben, in between, Durdaya. When he was in the sediments, in the lowliest place in a person's history, Hashem could still come along, Hashem could still help you. And therefore, that is the lesson between Yosef, that is the lesson between Chanukah. No matter how low a person feels in his life, Hashem could change that in a moment. I think we had a few, maybe it was last year or 2 years ago, we had a convict speaking this very Beit Knesset, Shalom Balva. Johnny, I'm calling out Shalom Balva over here, and Shalom Balva is he did a 60 years in prison for armed robbery. In the beginning, he was a drug addict that turned drug dealer, and then he couldn't afford his drugs anymore, so he decided to rob a gas station on gunpoint, and he was caught, and he was arrested, and they gave him 6 years in prison. And Shalom Balva was not religious at all. He had no idea even what Judaism was. And slowly in prison, through meeting the right people, he began to slowly become religious. And he said the first Yom Kippur he ever kept was in prison. And he didn't know there was such a concept of kosher even. So he said that Motzei Yom Kippur, after not eating for the whole day, his first time in his life, in his 20s, he fasted. He said he broke his fast on pork nachos. Because he had no idea that you were not allowed to eat non-kosher, but that's who he was. And all of a sudden, after 6 years in prison, after again meeting the right people, he became a full-fledged religious Jew. And now he goes around the country and around the world speaking about his story and exactly how Hashem changed his life. So again, Elazar ben Durdaya, Shalom Balva, Yosef Tzaddik Hashmonaim, they all have the same thing in common. That at the same time, a person can be in a very low place. That low place, Hashem can change that low place just in a moment's time. In the blink of an eye, Hashem can take that man out of the dumps and make him something special. That is one maybe simple connection according to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. What is the connection between Yosef, Miketz, and Chanukah? Moving on to another connection, I did see a Hidah. The Hidah comes along and the Hidah says that if you pay attention to the Al Nisim that we read now for the next 8 days, what does the Al Nisim say? That Hashem, you helped Am Yisrael, and we were halashim, or they were giburim, biyad halashim, they were timeim, biyad tuhurim, they were rabim, biyad me'atim, etc., etc. That Hashem, you delivered the Greeks who were big into the hands of the small, who were tamei to the hands of the pure, who were a lot in the hands of the little. Says the Hidah, that's exactly what happened with Paro's dream. Pay attention. You had 7 skinny cows, you had 7 fat cows, and who ended up swallowing who? The skinny cows ended up swallowing the fat cows. Says the Hidah, that's the hint. That's the hint of the Purim story. The skinny cows are Am Yisrael, the fat cows are the Greeks, and just like the Am Yisrael beat the Greeks, so to the skinny cows ended up swallowing the fat cows. That is a one beautiful remez by the Hidah. Continuing, Matem Moshe comes along and he says that there's a halakha when a person asks, where should I set up my candle? Where should I set up the menorah? What's the answer you're going to give him? Very good. It's absolutely correct. Shulchan Aruch says the person setting up his menorah, right? Lechatchila, it should be set up on the outside of his door, on the left side of his mezuzah. So the mezuzah is on the right? His menorah is on the left, and now he's wearing tzitzit. So the moment he walks inside his door, he's surrounded by mitzvot. Right? You have a thread that's tied 3 times. It doesn't unravel so quickly, and therefore to be surrounded by mitzvot, mezuzah on the yamin, menorah on the small, and your body with tzitzit, that's considered being surrounded in mitzvot. Says the Matei Moshe, if you take the very first words in this week's parasha, it was miketz shenatayim. It was after 2 years, Yosef gets released from prison, extra 2 years. Therefore, he says the words miketz shenatayim. Shenatayim is Rosh Tevot for shenatayim. Simol, ner, tadlik, yamin, mezuzah. Again, shenatayim. Shin, nun, taf, yud, mem. Shenatayim. Simol, ner, tadlik, yamin, mezuzah. The person walks inside his house. It should be semol, should be the menorah. The right should be mezuzah. He's wearing tzitzit. Everything's great. Therefore, it says Matei Moshe. That is a possible hint. Again, in parasha, what is the hint of Chanukah? That's all. Again, that's all just as an introduction. What I really came to tell you about is what I found again in Matei Moshe, but much later. He comes up and he says like this. This is in my opinion, an incredible hidush. If you look in the very first source in our sheets, the Torah tells us that after Yosef not seeing his brothers for a very long time, giving them a hard time, Shimon, Binyamin, finally he bring Binyamin over to Yosef, and Yosef decides at this moment to sit and have a seudah with his brothers. Pasuk says, Vayar Yosef itam et Binyamin. Yosef sees Binyamin with them. Vayomer la'asher al beito. He tells the person in charge of his house, Haveh anashim, bring the people, habaita, to the house, utevoach tevach vehechan. I want you to slaughter animals, behechan, and prepare it, because these people are eating with me in the tzoraim in the afternoon time. So says Matei Moshe, if you take the words tevach behechan, what does that mean? Tevach behechan, slaughter and prepare. Says the rabbi, the last word in the word tevach is look inside the sheet so you know it, tevach is a chet. The next word hechan, if you spin it and add the chet over, it spells Chanukah. Chet, tevach, Vehechan, the words the chet in Tevach and the word Hechan, it spells out Chanukah. Therefore, he comes up and he says that at this point in time, when Yosef was preparing a seudah for him and his brothers, he was actually preparing a seudah for Chanukah time. Says the Rabbi Matei Moshe, Berov Hashanim, he says in the second source. Okay. Berov Hashanim. Chanukah chal beParshat Miketz. In most years, like I explained, Chanukah falls out on Parshat Miketz. V'simanach, how do I know? Miketz shenatayim. This is the hint that I gave you before. What's Miketz shenatayim? No trikon. It's Rosh Tevot for Semol, Ner, Tadlik, Yamin, Mezuzah. Okay, that's the hint that we saw. However, he says, V'ani kibalti siman acher. I have a different siman. I have a different signal. Parshat Miketz, V'hi Miketz. V'tavoach tevach v'hechan. They slaughter and they prepare. Says the Rabbi, Hachet mitevach. Take the chet from tevach. V'ateva mean hachechan, in the entire word of the word chechan, and to prepare. Hein otiyot Chanukah. It spells out altogether the words Chanukah. V'samach l'seudat she'osim b'Chanukah. This was a seudah that we have a practice to make seudah. You're right, David. It's not a obligation to make a seudah, but a person could turn the seudot that he has now into seudat mitzvah, just like we could turn seudot Chanukah into seudat mitzvah. So to Yosef, he had a seudat mitzvah along with his brothers. Not only that, says Matei Moshe, v'otiyot u'tovoach tevach v'gematria mem dalet. If you take the gematria of utevoach tevach, it equals to 44. 44, the exact amount of candles that we light throughout the entire holiday. With the shamosh, exactly. It's 36. With the 8 times shamosh, it's 44 altogether. Therefore, he says utevoach tevach is 44, which is gematria of the exact amount of times that we light over the Nerot Chanukah. Beautiful. I love the hidush. I love the connection. So therefore, Yosef made a seudah Chanukah for him and his brothers. I continue reading the Mefarshim, and I see something surprising. That not only did Yosef make a seudah for Chanukah, but it says that he made also another seudah. After he's giving his brothers gifts at this point, if you look in source number 3 in the parasha, it says he's giving his brothers gifts, and he gives Binyamin 5 times amount than he gave all the other brothers, because Binyamin was his full blood brother. Same mother Rachel, therefore he gave him 5 times the amount. And after the Torah tells us that he gave Binyamin 5 times the amount, it says that he sat down with his brothers and he drank, and they drank until they became drunk. Says the pasuk inside, he gave him 5 times the amount, he drank and he got drunk along with the brothers. And my question is, wow, Yosef, Yosef is the epitome. He's the paradigm of moral standards. Like we explained last week, Yosef protected himself from immorality in Egypt. He protected all the Jewish people based on the fact that he protected himself. So Yosef is the paradigm of moral standards. And yet, strange to me that Yosef is doing something so low that he's getting drunk with his brothers. Not only that, but your father's mourning you. Your father has been mourning for the past how long? The past over 20 years, 22 years. Yet Yosef, you find that it's a good time to get drunk now with your brothers. Unless
salvation. Now first time he saw his brother.
It doesn't make a difference. Your father's still mourning. Not Chanukah, unless it's Purim. Exactly, unless Yosef had a much deeper kavanah. In fact, the rabbis tell us that Yosef did in fact had, that's like the Gemara says in Megillah, Hayav, Hayam, Lid Bisumei, Bipuriya, Ad Lo Yada. The person is supposed to he's obligated to get drunk on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between Arun Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So just like a person has an obligation to get drunk on Purim, what Yosef was doing at these two meals, like the title of the shiur suggests, celebrating Chanukah and Purim at the same meal. He was doing both times at the same thing. Now, you're going to ask me, why did he do this? For me, a very simple interpretation is Ma'aseh Avotim Lebanim. In order to bring down these holidays, sometimes the tzaddik has to do a physical act in order to bring down the holiday from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, Yosef HaTzaddik, knowing one day in his Ruach HaKodesh that one day there's going to be a holiday called Chanukah, one day there is going to be a holiday called Purim. Therefore, Yosef HaTzaddik in his kavanah, when he brings down the brothers in order to invite them to Seudah, he had dual kavanah. Dual kavanah number one, I'm celebrating Purim right now. I'm also celebrating Chanukah right now. That is Yosef's entire mindset, entire goal at this point. And also, by the way, it's very telling because look at the words again. B'tavoach, tevach, v'hechan. He slaughtered and he prepared and he brought. My question is, if Yosef is bringing meat to the brothers for the Seudah, why go through this whole thing where you have to tell me that he slaughtered? Obviously, Yosef HaTzaddik is a religious man. He's not going to eat non-kosher meat. Therefore, why does the Torah have to go out of its way to tell me, B'tavoach, tevach, v'hechan? Just say, and Yosef said, bring me the meat. Why do you have to tell me? Okay, that's very nice. But again, B'tavoach tevach means that he slaughtered. But I'm assuming Yosef HaTzaddik is keeping the law of kashrut. Therefore, why does the Torah have to go out of its way to tell me that he slaughtered? Just tell me that he brought the meat. Unless in the words B'tavoach tevach is hidden something much deeper.
He accused his brother for eating the heaven and the
That's very good. That's very good. So therefore, it's going out of the way to tell me that Yosef was slaughtering. He was slaughtering. Deeper interpretation is as follows. If anybody ever took a course in slaughtering animals, in order to make it kosher, you have to slaughter two simanim. What is two simanim? Kaneh, vaveshet, which is in English, the windpipe, the trachea, and the esophagus, which is the windpipe and the food pipe. Oh, says the rabbi as follows. He says, the honest truth is that if I had to put a siman to both Chanukah and Purim, I would have called Chanukah and Purim Kaneh vaveshet. I would call them these two organs in a person's body. Because think about it, I'm going to ask you a question and tell me how you always learned. Why is it by these two holidays, these two distinct holidays, Purim and Chanukah, which is the happiest times of the Jewish nation, but again, it's not actually written inside the Torah. The Gemara talks about Chanukah and Purim. It's not written anyway explicit in Torah Shebiktav. But anyway, we celebrate it in two completely different ways. On Purim, we have an obligation to have a Seudah. If the person doesn't have a Seudah, he doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. So you have an obligation on Purim to sit and have a Seudah, even if Purim falls out on a Friday, which I think it does this year. You still have to have the Seudah, and it cannot coincide with your Seudat Shabbat. Therefore, prepare now. If you're having a Seudah on Purim on Friday, make sure that it's like breakfast Seudah very early in the morning to make sure it doesn't coincide with Shabbat. But Purim, that you see, we serve Purim, we commemorate Purim with the Seudah. But Chanukah time, like David pointed out, there's no mitzvah to have a Seudah on Chanukah. The opposite, more Chanukah for us, it's more of a spiritual holiday. There's no obligation to have a Seudah. You might come along and tell me you're right, because Purim is 1 day and Chanukah is 8 days, so maybe you're not supposed to be eating Seudot every single day. That's fine, but that's not a logical explanation. Bottom line is, if it's a similar holiday, both rabbinic, both celebrating miracles, why is it that by Purim there's a Seudah and Chanukah there's no Seudah? What is the answer to the question?
Physical salvation,
Absolutely. And that's tied in with what I'm about to say. Physical salvation versus spiritual salvation. What does that mean? In the times of the Purim story, what was the sin of Am Yisrael? What was the sin that began the whole, avalanche down? Very good. That the Jewish people, the neheneh from Seudah me'oto rasha, says the Gemara, that they had hana'ah, they benefited from the Seudah of Achashverosh. Whether that means they ate non-kosher meat or whatever it was. Bottom line is, they benefited. Now, what benefited? What part of the body benefits when a person eats non-kosher? His esophagus. Very good. His esophagus. The pipe, his food pipe. Therefore, since on Purim the sin was done through physical, therefore Hashem says the salvation is going to come through physical, and therefore the destruction is going to be physical. Therefore, on Purim, Haman, he hated the Jew. He hated the existence of a Jew. Therefore, his whole job was lahashmid, laharog, ulahabed. Haman's whole goal was not to allow them to continue living, just not celebrating Hagim, not celebrating Hashem. No, I want them to die. I want to wipe them out. Therefore, since the sin of Am Yisrael was physical, that they ate at the physical seudah, therefore their food pipe benefited physically, therefore the destruction is physical, therefore the celebration is physical. Therefore we have to have a physical celebration, hence we have an obligation to have a seudah. But on Purim time, well, on Chanukah time, what was the sin? We didn't eat anything non-kosher. What was the sin when it came to Chanukah? Chanukah was, they weren't learning Torah, they were speaking Lashon Hara against each other. Therefore, the sin was with what? The sin was with their trachea, was with their windpipe. And therefore it says, Hashem, since your whole sin was in spiritual, your whole sin was the fact that you neglected the Torah, you neglected halachot, therefore your destruction is going to be spiritual. The Greeks didn't mind the Jew existed. They didn't mind that the Jew was alive, but they didn't like the fact that the Jew had a relationship with Hashem. That was their problem. Hence, they took away from us mitzvot that connects us to God. Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat, Brit Milah. These are the ABCs of our religion that they decided to take away. Therefore, since the whole punishment was spiritual, therefore the celebration, which is the salvation, is spiritual. Therefore, says the rabbis, when we celebrate Chanukah, you're right, there is no seudah, no obligation to eat. Our obligation is to reconnect with the Torah. That's why it says in the Al Nisim, the goal of the Greeks was to forget our Torah. Therefore, our job on Chanukah is what? To try to remember. That's why on Chanukah it's a great time to review your learning, because the best way not to forget is by review. That's why it's ironic, by the way. It's very ironic that on Chanukah time, not many people are learning. That's the Yetzirah, because the Yetzirah knows the benefit of learning in this time, and he does everything he can in order to try to get you to stop.
Holiday season is supposed to go away.
What do you mean?
Go away holiday season.
Okay.
The Jews want to take it off for holiday season, vacation time.
So you're right. Like I said, it's part of the Yetzirah that he wants us not to learn, because that's the whole goal of the holiday. Anyway, so therefore says the Rabbi, Bnei Issachar says this, that Chanukah is keneged the windpipe, and Purim is keneged the food pipe. Says the Rabbi inside Bnei Issachar. Before that, I want to see the Sfat Emet. Sfat Emet tells us that it was Purim also. Says Sfat Emet, Va'amina lefi remes hamifarashim tabach vehechan hu Chanukah. Like I told you before, tabach machar, that is vehechan, that's Chanukah. Af anu ne'emar v'ishtakeru hu mirumaz al Purim. And the fact that Yosef got drunk with his brothers, that is Purim. Ki Chanukah u Purim hem nisim achronim. They were like the last miracles that Hashem performed on our behalf. But anyway, getting back to Bnei Issachar, he says bottom line is Purim is the kaneh and Chanukah is the veshet, or the opposite. It says Bnei Issachar, bet hazmanim halalu. These two times, Chanukah u Purim, hem b'bichinat kaneh v'veshet. They are windpipe and esophagus. Chanukah nitkan hodot u halel hu amudah b'kaneh. The whole point of Chanukah, that's why we come along. If you notice, by the way, over time, there is no halel on Purim. We don't read halel on Purim. Why not? Because the goal is not to celebrate by praising Hashem. You're right, you're going to tell me the Megillahs and that's what the Gemara says.
No,
but what?
It's outside of Israel. We didn't have it outside of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
There's no outside of Israel.
Oh, you're okay, fine. I hear also the Gemara gives another answer because we were still under Ahashverosh's rule. Right? When we come along and we say, what do we say? We say that we're thinking that we're under Hashem's rule, but we're not. At this point, we're still under Ahashverosh. But anyway, he says another answer. He says, bottom line is that what are you coming and praising Hashem on Purim for? That's not the time to praise Hashem. Chanukah is the time to praise Hashem. Therefore, we use our trachea to praise Hashem. That's what he says. Purim b'mishteh b'simcha. But Purim is celebrated with a meal. Hu b'veshet. That is the esophagus. That is the food pipe. Because we have to subjugate both our windpipes and our esophagus to Hashem. The days of Ahashverosh we sinned with our esophagus, with our food pipe. Shnehenu mis'udato shel Torah, because we had hana, we benefited from the seudah of Achashverosh. V'haveshet hu koach gufani she'al yado, and the veshet, the esophagus, represents that koach of gufani, of physical. Therefore, nuzan haguf, it gives nutrients to the guf. Al ken hayta gezerah al gufanit. Therefore, the whole gezerah, the whole decree was on our bodies. V'kasher azah Hashem yitbarach le'amo, and once Hashem saved His nation, kavu hachamenu zal yom tov beruach hakodesh seudat mitzvah baveshet. Therefore, since the destruction was going to come through our bodies, once Hashem gave us salvation, He gave us salvation through a physical meal. And the physical meal, what benefits our physical meal? The esophagus. Therefore, that's the connection there. However, Bnei HaYibanim, when it comes to the Greeks, Pagmu b'lashon hara bitul Torah. The sin in the times of the Greeks was lashon hara bitul Torah. Sha'pegam hu bekaneh. Over here, the sin was with the kaneh. The sin was with the trachea. Therefore, the Greeks, they went against our spiritual. They took away Torah from us. They took away tefillah from us. Shein bekaneh, which is the trachea. Therefore, now that Hashem saved us, we have to praise Hashem with the exact same thing that we sinned with, which is our trachea. Therefore, we have a lot of tefillah nowadays. We sing Hallel, Hallel Gamur in the next 8 days. That is the whole goal, because the goal was in the same way that we were pogam. Is that clear? Yeah, but now we're holding good. So therefore, Tabuach vehechan, Tevach vehechan is Chanukah, and he also made a Sudat Purim together. I was thinking that I could even take it a step further. Because you have to ask yourself a question. How did Yosef know this? How did Yosef know that there was such a Chag called Chanukah? How did he know that there was such a thing called Purim? You remember last week I told you that Yaakov Avinu, through his Ruach HaKodesh, he knew these holidays were coming. You remember I told you last week when he prayed against Esav, what did he say? Hida says this. He says, Hatzileni na miyad ahi miyad Esav. And Hida says, take the Rosh Tevot of Hatzileni na miyad. Hey, mem, nun. What does that spell? Hey, mem, nun, Haman. Therefore, when Yaakov Avinu was praying against Esav, you really had who in mind? Haman in mind. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu, he knew that Purim was coming up. How do you know Chanukah was coming up? Because if you remember, I also told you that when he went back for Pahim Kitanim, the small jugs, and the rabbi called Panei Hazah says those were Pahim Kitanim that held oil inside of them, and the oil was going to be the eventual oil that they anointed Shaul HaMelech, and with that oil they also lit in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. So therefore he knew exactly what it was. He prayed for Haman Hatzileni Na, he prayed for Chanukah in the times of the Pach Shemim. That's clear. So Yaakov knew about it. And the rabbis tell us that since he knew about it, he also told Yosef about it. But that was the only son that he told about it. He only told Yosef. Why did he only tell Yosef? So the explanation is as follows. You remember last week's parasha? It says, and Yaakov loved Yosef, but Yaakov ahaved Yosef. Why? Ki ben Zukunim hu lo. Because he was Ben Zukunim. What does Ben Zukunim mean? Son of his old age. And the rabbis asked the same exact question, but Yosef is not really his son of old age, because he had Binyamin after. Actually, my son asked me this question last week. Well, Abba, why does it call Yosef Ben Zukunim? He's not Ben Zukunim. You also have Binyamin. So what did I answer him? Rashi on the spot. What does Rashi say? She says, you call him Unkulus. Unkulus says it doesn't mean his youngest son. It means Bar Hakim. What does Bar Hakim mean? Bar Hakim means he was wise. That Yosef was the wisest of all the brothers. Since Yosef was the wisest of all brothers, therefore Yaakov Avinu, he gave all the Torah that he learned by Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever over to Yosef, including this Hidush about the holidays of Chanukah and Purim. Oh, not only that, but if you look in the gift that he gave them, what gift did he give them? He gave him a Ketonet Pasim. And don't make the mistake, by the way. The Gemara says that all the brothers got Ketonet Pasim. Right? Exactly. Very good. That was worth 2 Silaim. A lot of times I have a claim on my kids' yeshiva where every single year they come back and they tell me that, oh, Yosef got Ketonet Pasim and all the brothers were just because they didn't get. That's wrong. Really, everybody got Ketonet Pasim, but just Yosef got a little extra cuff. That's why it's called Ketonet Pasim. Pasim comes from the word Pasyad because his cuff extended all the way to his sleeve. And the Gemara says, oh, how much extra did Yosef get? He got an extra of 2 Selaim extra. Also, question is, what is the significance of the 2 Selaim? Everything in the Torah, by the way, everything the forefathers did, everything the forefathers did had great significance. So the question is, what is the significance of the 2 Selaim? On a simple interpretation, not what I came to say, on a simple, Two Shvatim, that could be it. Or could also be the deeper explanation, which I'm going to say, which is really Chanukah and Purim, the two extra holidays. But on a simple interpretation, the Gemara says that if you had to give a price on how much a word is worth, what is the price for a word?
One seller.
One seller, very good. And how much is the price for quietness?
Two seller.
Two selaim, very good. And at this point, the Gemara says, Milah b'sela, shitikuta b'trein. However, Milah is worth 1 coin, however, keeping quiet is worth 2 coins. Now, what is the musar over here? The musar was that Yaakov was trying to tell Yosef, you've been talking a lot these past days. You've been saying a lot of lashon hara against your brothers. What does the pasuk say? Ve'evei Yosef, etibatam hara'ai labihem. Yosef was talking a lot of lashon hara. So people think, because Yaakov Avinu, he gave him 2 slaim, that's what this whole balagan came. No, Yaakov was actually giving Yosef musar. He said, Yosef, you're talking way too much these days. Instead of talking, you should know, talking is worth a sela. However, shtikuta, if you were to be quiet, it would be worth 2 slaim. Therefore, he gave him a coat or a sweater that was mirumaz, that hinted this slaim hint to Yosef. He told him, by the way, your coat, you know how much it's worth? 2 coins extra than your brother. Do you want to know why? Because your quietness is worth much more than you talking. That is a simple interpretation. However, the deeper interpretation is like we're saying right now. The reason why he gave him the extra coat, which is worth extra 2 slaim, because 2 slaim is keneged, Chanukah, and Purim, to tell him that, by the way, you should know, Yosef, there's an extra holiday coming up, and those 2 holidays is Minumaz and the 2 Selaim. Says the Rabbi, Hatam Sofeh, in the next source, he says, V'hinei, Kol HaShivatim hisigu b'sechlam hazach v'hakadosh kol HaTorah. Now, all the Shivatim, they understood the entire Torah before it was given, including the forefathers. Ad shelo nitana, before it was given. Chutz, the only thing they didn't understand, the only thing they didn't receive, mitzvat Purim v'Chanukah. The only thing they didn't get was Purim v'Chanukah. Shem chus Torah. This is outside the Torah, because again, there's no place in the Torah that talks about Chanukah or Purim. Chanukah, Purim is miracles that, again, but where is it written? It's written Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's written in the oral tradition. Exactly. So the brothers, they might have understood Torah Sheba'ktav, but that doesn't explain Chanukah Purim. They didn't know Chanukah Purim. However, it says the Rabbi, Mashi'en ken Yosef. Except Yosef. He was smarter than all the brothers. Like Unkulu says, Bar Hakim. He was the smartest. Masalo kol Torah shelaman. He gave over all the Torah that he learned. The whole perushim ha'amitiim afilu Purim v'Chanukah nemei. Yaakov also gave over to Yosef Purim v'Chanukah. Ki hisiguhu yado la'asik haneskala, because he could understand everything. Purim v'Chanukah nemei. Ki hisigu okay al yadosh v'zeo she'osiv Yaakov liYosef yotem me'achav shnei sleim milat. That's why Yaakov gave over to Yosef 2 extra slahim. Hayinu bet mitzvot shel me'atorah sheba'al peh hanimaz v'slahim. Therefore, he gave him these 2 extra coins in order to tell him, by the way, there's 2 extra holidays of Chanukah and Purim. So now the question that we have to ask ourselves is as follows. The question is, why give it over Dafka to Yosef? Now, I understand he was the smartest, but why give it over Dafka to Yosef? And second of all, Yosef chose to reveal the secret to the brothers when? At this point, where were they when he revealed the secret to his brothers of Chanukah and Purim? They were in Egypt. So there must be some sort of connection why Yosef wanted to reveal it Dafka in Galut Mitzrayim. What is the connection between Chanukah and Purim that he revealed it during Galut Mitzrayim? You understand the question?
Give them hope.
Give them hope that what? That
Because
one day.
Hashem already started.
Shua is going to come at some point.
But Chanukah and Purim is not. It's way after. You're saying, I guess the fact that they had to be let out of Egypt, I mean, if they're going to be saved in Chanukah and Purim, that means they're going to be saved from Egypt. I like it. I accept it. There's a deeper answer. The answer begins with Geshrat HaLevi. Levi Yitzchak Mebartitcher. He comes along and he says, we make a special bracha while we light the candles. What's the bracha that we make? Sha'asa nisim labutenu. And we also make it before we read the Megillah. The question is, why don't we make that same bracha during the other holidays? Meaning, why don't we make Sha'asa nisim labutenu on Pesach? Why don't we make Sha'asa nisim labutenu on Sukkot? It's all miracles. So why don't we make it by Sukkot the Pesach, but we do make it by Chanukah and Purim? Says the Rabbi, incredible. He says, because the miracles in each of these times were significantly different from the others. Why is that?
Only this.
But it's not only this, that can't be. So many miracles that happened in the times of the Purim story, times of the Chanukah story. That's why we say Nisim Livlaot in the Ala Nisim, because more than one is. He says over there, Levi Yitzhak, that there's more, the difference of miracles is significantly different. How does he explain? He says, because by Pesach and Sukkot, the miracles that Hashem performed on our behalf was beyond nature. It was supernatural. What's supernatural? You tell me. Water turning into blood, frogs jumping out of ovens, ground turning into kinim, fireballs that swallow within ice, animals being comfortable in their own habitat, sea splitting into half. That's called supernatural miracles. Ananeh kavod, supernatural miracles. Chanukah and Purim, what was the miracle? What was the miracle? The miracle was that it looked normal. It looked normal. That the miracles of Chanukah and Purim were not supernatural miracles, they were natural miracles. A person could come along, very good. A person could come along and say, oh, the reason why the Jews were saved during Purim is because Ahashverosh fell in love with Esther HaMalkah. And it could be the reason why the Jews were saved in times of the Chanukah stories because the Hashmonaim, they fought the Greeks and they won. That doesn't sound so miraculous to me. It was like a regular war. It's a regular love story between Esther. Yeah, it's like a love story between Ahashverosh and Esther. What's so miraculous about that? There says, the Levi Yitzhak Mibarditchik, when we say the words, Sha'asa nisim labotenu, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh. He explains the words bazman hazeh to mean bazman in a natural time. Not supernatural, but bazman hazeh means in the realms of nature. Masha'en came Pesach Chanukah, it was beyond nature. Therefore, you can't say the words bazman, which is the realm of nature, if something happened supernatural. Says Rabbi Yitzhak inside, he says, Menosach HaBaracha Omrim, in the Nosach HaBaracha we say the follows, Sha'asa nisim l'avotenu b'ayamim hahem bazman hazeh, ki kol hanisim hayu lemala mehazman. Because when it comes to Pesach and Sukkot, all the miracles were above nature. Kemon nisei Mitzrayim, v'yam suf, v'yarden, v'chol hanisim hayu lemala min hateva. Everything was above nature. Masha'en ke nes Chanukah u'Purim, she'yan betoch hateva, key line. It was inside the teva. Everything was natural. The Hashmonaim u'banav asu milchama. The Hashmonaim and their sons, they made a war and they happened to win the war. U'Purim, hayta Esther HaMalkah, lechein. Purim we had Esther HaMalkah. Lechein mevrachim b'Chanukah she'asa nisim bazman hazeh. Ritzono lomar betoch hazman shu olam hazeh. That's what it means. It means that everything was in the realm of nature. Betoch hateva. Asa nisim shakol hayam mi'oto yitbarach. Everything came from Hashem. But again, the difference is supernatural versus natural. And that's, for me, that's something unbelievable. Because the truth is that there's a Maharal Miprag that's a famous Maharal. He comes along and he says, and this fits with him, he comes along and he says that why did Hashem have to do it? Where he created, so to speak, two different Torot. What type of Torah do we have? We have Torah Shebichtav, we have Torah Sheba'al Peh. He said, why did Hashem have to do it this way? There's two different Torot. He says because the two different Torot, they signify or they represent the two ways that Hashem makes miracles. In Torah Shebiktav, we have Pesach and Sukkot, that represents crazy miracles. That represents everything that's considered supernatural. Masha'en in Torah Sheba'al Peh, it's more on the hidden agenda. That's why Chanukah and Purim, since it's in the realm of nature, it's written and revealed to us in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which doesn't go so crazy. It's just in the realm of nature. That's why Chanukah and Purim is not hinted anywhere in the Torah, because the Torah Shebiktav only discusses miracles of above nature, supernatural status. Torah Sheba'al Peh is more of a calm status. And therefore,
was also within nature.
oh, there you're good. That answers our question. So therefore, well, he said Yosef was also within the realm of nature. I'm going to explain what you're saying a little deeper. So therefore, since Chanukah and Purim is more of a natural type of miracle, therefore it has to be written in Torah Sheba'al Peh, which only discusses natural miracles, not supernatural miracles. It was befitting that Yosef reveal this to the public, reveal this to the people, because Yosef himself, he also represented Torah Sheba'al Peh. How do I know? Because if you look in the Apter Rav, which is one of the next source, before I read the Apter Rav, I want to read you the Maharal. Maharal says as follows: Hatam shenatan lanu hakadosh baruch hu et Torah b'shtei bechinot. He gave us two different Torot, Sheba'al Peh, the oral, and the one that's written. Torah Shebiktav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Al pi ma shematzinu shehakadosh baruch hu manhig et olamo b'shtei hanhagot. Hashem runs the world in two different characters, two different behaviors. Put it that way, two different ways. Hanhagat nisit, the hanhagat tiv'it, the miraculous way and the natural way. Hanagat nisit, when it comes to the supernatural, the miracle way, He HaKadosh Baruch Hu manhig et olamo bivli itlabishut b'mazalot v'kochavei hashemayim mu'onim ala teva. Hashem doesn't cover anything. There's no stars, there's no moons, there's no constellations, there's nothing. There's only Hashem coming along and making miracles in the world. V'ilu hanagat tiv'it. But even natural miracles, he says, it's also, of course, Hashem. However, Hashem is dressed. Hashem is so to speak, he's coded. He's considered blocked with other people that sounds like they made the miracle, but the truth was it was really HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, going back to what we said, Yosef, he represents Torah She'Ba'al Peh. His whole goal was, I need to bring Chanukah and Purim, which is a natural miracle within the realm of nature, and he represents Torah She'Ba'al Peh. How do I know? Says the Abd Rabbi in Israel. He says, if you pay attention to the way Paro dresses Yosef after he calls him king, it says that he gave him Vayilbesh Oto Bigdei Shesh. He gave him what's called Bigdei Shesh, and he rode him on a chariot that's called Merkavat HaMishnah, and he also gave him Aragat HaMishnah Asher Lo, that he gave him. Says the Abd Rav, Bigdei Shesh represents the what? 6 ways of Mishnah. Merkavat HaMishnah, the word is in there, and Asher Lo, that he belongs Lo in Gematria is 36. 36 is the 36 Mesachtot that we have in Shas. Therefore, it says Abd Rav, now I understand why it had to be Yosef who gave over these 2 holidays to the Jewish people, because since these holidays are hidden in no other place than the Talmud, and Yosef, he himself represents what the Talmud is. He represents Torah She'Ba'al Peh. And therefore, it couldn't be nobody except Esav HaTzadik, or Yosef HaTzadik.
He's also Yisod.
He's also Yisod, correct? Yes.
Which is the oral Torah is Yisod.
Yes, absolutely, even deeper. So therefore, we see over here that it couldn't have been anybody else but Yosef. Yosef represents Torah She'Ba'al Peh. Purim Chanukah represents, or inside Torah She'Ba'al Peh. It could have been no one else than Yosef to give it over. Now, we have to answer our final question. Our final question was, why did Yosef reveal the secret to the Jews, to the brothers, while they were dafka where? In Egypt. I guess simply it means he was giving them hope. That if one day there's going to be a Chanukah Purim, that means you're also going to get out of Galut Mitzrayim. I accept it. But the deeper answer is as follows. This is the Ramban says this. This is incredible. You saw it. It was worth it for the Ramban for this class. It says the Ramban as follows. He says that the entire reason why God made miracles in Mitzrayim, and we read about it every single year on Pesach, during Parashat Shemot, Bo Va'era, all those things, the reason why we go it over is so we could recognize the smaller miracles that we have in our lives. That is the goal. The whole reason why Hashem made the whole Galut Mitzrayim and Yitziat Mitzrayim, so we could come along and recognize the miracles that Hashem does for us, including the miracles of Chanukah and Purim. Because if it wasn't for the miracles of Mitzrayim, we wouldn't be able to recognize Chanukah and Purim. It seems like Chanukah and Purim are a direct result of the miracles that Hashem did for us in Egypt. They go hand in hand together. Therefore, says the Ramban, he says, I'll read you last source inside. The big miracles, the reason why Hashem does the big miracles, Adam modeh benisim hanistarim. Hashem, or people, we can recognize even the smaller miracles. Shehem yisod haTorah, that is the foundation of our Torah kula. Binyan hanisim shal yitziat Mitzrayim, ki tachlit kol hanisim sha'asa imanu hakadosh baruch hu. The goal of Hashem making for us miracles, b'yitziat Mitzrayim, lamana min hateva, which is supernatural. He kedei shenakir al yadan benisim hagedolim hatimunim betoch hanagat hateva midei yom v'yomo. So we can recognize the natural miracles that Hashem does for us on a daily basis. Therefore, says Ramban, and this makes sense, that the whole reason why Yosef revealed to the brothers Chanukah and Purim during Galut Mitzrayim is because they go hand in hand with each other. There's no other time, says Yosef, that it's going to be more appropriate for me to reveal Chanukah and Purim to the brothers rather than at the time of Yitziat Mitzrayim, because the whole goal of Yitziat Mitzrayim is to get us to recognize that Hashem does for us good. And therefore, there's no better time to reveal this secret of Chanukah and Purim, but at the time where we're supposed to recognize all the small miracles that Hashem gives us. Therefore, I think everything falls in place very nicely. We have a few answers to our question. We have a few connections. Let's just review the connections and we're done. Connections between Chanukah and Parashat Miketz. Connection number 1, what Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky said. He said that Chanukah and Yosef represent the possibility of a Jew being in the lowliest place, but at the same time he could rise to the highest heights. In the beginning, Yosef was a convict sitting inside prison, but all of a sudden he became king of Egypt. That's exactly what Chanukah is. The Jews were in a lowly place. Chashmonim, they turned it around, we're in a high place. That represents that a Jew should never give up hope. And at the same time, even if he finds himself in a very low place in life, Hashem can turn around in a moment's time. That is Chaim Kanievsky. We have the Hida. The Hida say? Hida said that just like we read in the Al Nisim that it was the strong being turned to the hands of the weak, so too that was Paro's dream. Just like the skinny cows swallowed the fat cows, so to Am Yisrael, in the times of the Greek story, we also, the skinny cows were the Jews, we swallowed the fat cows, which were the Greeks. That was the Hida. Then we saw from the Matei Moshe. What does he say? He says the word Mikit Shnatayim. Shnatayim is Rosh Tevot for Simol, Ner, Tadlik, Yamin, Mezuzah. The exact same way we're supposed to set up the Mezuzah or the Nerot Chanukah in our homes. And finally we had the biggest hint is Utvoach, Tevach, Vehechan. Tevach, Vehechan is Chanukah. And he also hinted inside Purim. Everything that Hashem does is for a reason. He had to reveal for us Dafka. Yosef HaTzadik had to reveal Dafka, the miracles of Chanukah and Purim, which is Torah She'Ba'al Peh, which is something that he represented. I guess my blessing is that anytime we read these stories in the Torah, we should know that it's, like I say every single week almost, it's laden with hints. And nothing on the Torah, nothing should be taken as face value. You should know that every single word in the Torah, every single nukudah in the Torah, every single nuance in the Torah, there's so much lessons we can learn from it, there's so much depth to it, and therefore when we read the Torah, we should approach it with fear and trepidation, what Hashem has in store for every single person in this room. Wishing everybody here a Shabbat Shalom and a Chanukah Sameach.